All right, everyone. We now have Elaine Elizabeth up. She is an author, speaker, mentor, and CEO of Heart Activation. Her talk title is Reclaiming Innocence, a Pathway to Intimacy.
Yes, I am so excited to be here and especially to follow up with the previous speakers, Tracy and Tony. I just want to acknowledge and say thank you so much for being vulnerable and opening up and sharing this intimate space, which is a great segue into my presentation because the intimacy moments that are shared, right, with people opening up and really allowing each other to see is kind of what I'm talking about today. Not kind of, it is. So now innocence as a pathway to intimacy might seem completely opposite or a different, like relatable. What is the relation there? So I would like to state first that so intimacy to me, what I typically bring this to is into me see. So it's a nice little way for me to think about that. It's not just about romantic relationships, right? Intimacy is me living a life that is full of love without being blocked by the masks that I once told myself I needed in order for me to be safe to connect with others. And intimacy I create with myself by removing the mask, by showing up for myself and being vulnerable and really acknowledging those things that I was told I was only lovable, worthy, and valuable if I did these certain things, if I achieved these certain things, if I was successful, if I produced, like we live in a society where things are very much based on the level of our success determines the level of love that we have access to or that we perceive we have access to. So again, I am Elaine Elizabeth and I am a mentor, an author, a speaker, and I have my own business, Heart Activation. But I am also a person with extensive lived experience of childhood trauma, which involves sexual assault, which involves addiction, generations of addiction and alcoholism. As the previous speakers that spoke to, like my first introduction to the mental health and to 12-step rooms was at the age of 14 with my almost successful suicide attempt. And that had then led me to seeking help through many different therapists and also 12-step rooms. So I was the youngest person in 12-step rooms. And it has been my journey all the way through, so I'm 41 now, and I've been in and out of this recovery, like revolving door of a lot of different 12-step anonymous programs. And it wasn't until like right now I've been almost free of all substances for almost 8 years, but it's not until I learned to tap into the innocence that I was actually able to really find the compassion, find the grace, find the forgiveness, find the childlike wonder, find all of these things that I had been searching for in drugs and self-harm and escapism and all of these. Like, it wasn't until I tapped into that innocence for myself that I was able to actually authentically connect to people. So that's a little bit about my personal experience. So I was a hairstylist for 17 years and with like hairstylists, they tell you like my clients told me everything for some of the depths of their soul was revealed to me while they were in my chair. And that pattern kind of leaked over into my professional career as I am today. Because in 2019 is when I opened up Heart Activation. After becoming a recovery coach trainer, and a peer support specialist, and trauma advocate, and all the different titles that really just helped me to hone in on my personal experiences, to share that, to be able to help other people illuminate and comfort themselves, to learn that intimacy within themselves. So the pattern that I saw is that no matter who sat in my chair, no matter how successful they were, no matter what type of designer clothes or anything that they were in, everyone presented a level of childhood wounds. Like everybody has these types of, like, we can call it trauma. Like I know in the method normal, they call it big T, little t, where it's like the big type of traumas. But either way, as if we think about the masks that we wear today and how we show up in society and the things that block us from truly connecting to another, it's because of these childhood, the way that we were raised. I know another speaker earlier today was talking about our digestion code, and she brought in the idea of how we begin adjusting our cries to be able to get the needs that we met. And it's the same thing. So we begin noticing how we get our needs met by the reflection that our caregivers give to us. So for me, it was so many different masks of, well, I was like a good girl. So, because I never spoke my emotions, because I never truly shared how I felt. Um, and I was just sitting pretty and just went with the flow. So in my relationships, the mask of like, I must be a good girl prevented me from like truly connecting, well, sharing myself, sharing at a vulnerable place. Another mask was of achievement. So this was like, okay, like I will give you attention when you do this, well, or when you're finished with this and you're successful with this, then yay, you get praise. So these masks were created at such a young age, and nobody is privy to not having those masks. Like, we have all created this facade, and I feel, and it's just my experience, that and what I've seen with the people that I work with where I speak at, and just so many people that I connect with around the world, is we're like a society that is starved for connection. We're at a point where um, we know how to do the body, we know how to bypass the body, and like know how to bypass the mind in order to achieve things. But now, like, how do we tap into this without being like harmful to other people? Without being judgmental, and like opening up space, like having that compassion. Um, so part of my experiences, and noticing, and that's why I started heart activation, honestly, was because I was like, the connection points, like, how do we come back to this innocence and childlike wonder? So if I think of my kids when they were younger, like what they just wanted to they trusted so openly. They saw the world through just like the magic and the mundane. They saw like the little significant things as being such a powerful, potent space. And so it gets me emotional because so many of us have built up this intolerance to softness, to innocence, but really to allow people to see the vulnerability within us, right? To allow people in. That's where that true connection happens and where the intimacy begins landing. So I do understand that there are different levels and places for different types of intimacy. But for me, it was definitely understanding my relationship with myself was first and foremost needed to begin to unpack in the ways in which I wasn't actually showing up as myself for other people. Um, so now using innocence and reclaiming that as a pathway towards more intimate living. Um, so for me, and how I began to open this up, because I didn't want to be a hard ass, pardon me. Like I was so angry at one point, and I cut so many people out of my life. But with that, I also drew a whole barrier around me. I became cold, I became hardened, and I didn't let anybody in, nor could I experience the joy that was in front of me everywhere, because I was hardened with boundaries. And like I am all for boundaries. This is a different, like, I had anger, so much anger that was very difficult for me to dissolve, to learn that I'm safe within myself, and so the returning back to knowing and trusting that I'm safe within me, uh, was pivotal, that it all begins with me. So some of the things that I began to really like unpack what innocence and how I can begin to tap into the compassion, the understanding, and just wanting to see I inherently see the good in everybody. And at one point, I thought that was a toxic thing. But today I can learn discernment, and that is only through the gift of being able to recognize what my inner child really needs. So taking a step back and, I think as a society, I know for me, like I didn't even know what brought me joy. Like I didn't even know what my highest excitement was because I had been so conditioned as to achieve, to succeed, to get things done and produce. And that I wasn't fitting into the mold. So now I was also shaming myself while not fitting into the mold. And I was abusing drugs and, alcohol and all these other things that I needed. And I chuckle because the thought process that I had is just, now it's not relatable to who I am today. However, I feel so much compassion for those younger versions of myself, because it was a lot. Like I was going through a lot. I had so much to unpack. And instead of shaming them, like I learned to show up for her and I learned to show up for all previous versions of myself that, and then slowly as I began to recognize the ways in which walls were built, this joy, this excitement for life, this passion, this the way that I turned my pain into a purpose, um, started to slowly like emerge from that. And so showing up for myself, connecting to what joy is, like what are some of the things that I actually like to do as a child? Which again, like for me, I didn't really like I never believed in Santa Claus. That's like how like I just never did. It was told to me that it was like he was never a real thing, which is okay, but that just goes to show there was no imagination like I had to survive. It was pure survival. And so tapping into a creative energy for me, I like to paint. I like to draw and doodle. And I like to, these things I had to like rekindle within myself. A lot of like to pretend play, but like in, a different, I don't know, like teaching, like I like to teach. And so now that's what I'm doing. And, really leaning into, and I know, and I feel like I always must preface this as like, it sounds kind of like woo woo or ridiculous, but it's not, it is, like, how can we have fun? How can we have fun in life and build relationships that are based in authenticity if we aren't knowing how to tap into those spaces of excitement for nothing? Like now, there's so in my free gift there are some like creative prompts and exercises that you can tap into. There's also questions and different type of masks and roles that you can have, you know, that we create. So, through the many different programming and structures within our minds that we were told that we're only worthy to receive love if we perform this way. Um, and so, so now, not only now am I able to, anytime there's a trigger, and I know somebody was talking about triggers earlier on, in relationships, specifically romantic relationships, it comes up a lot. And so this is like me recognizing when I'm projecting my wounds onto my other person, onto my partner. So now I'm able to be like, what is the emotional need that I'm actually wanting to have? Like, what is it that Elaine needs right now? Is it safety? Is it emotional acknowledgement? Is it feeling like you're valued, loved, and secure. So there's like a list of questions that I ask myself. And then I go to like past experiences that I've also felt that way. And I show up and I visualize this where what does little Elaine need? What does the younger version of myself need? And give that to myself. And it's like an integration process where the me now is now meeting any of those versions of my past selves. And what this does is this helps me to recognize how I'm projecting outwardly, but it also gets me to learn more about myself. This also then takes the pressure from my partner, hopefully. And also, um, I mean, I do this with my kids as well because at one point, I was also projecting my wounds onto my parenting and parenting from a place of like the complete opposite of how I was raised, which was just a wounded projection. uh, so it's showing up for those heightened emotional responses and being with myself, showing up for myself, and once I'm able to show up for myself and I can see how I react and respond, I also then begin to see, wait, other people are also in this space of responding and reacting from their inner child wounds. As I began to unfold and unpack and take things less personally, I was like, oh, wait. And my years of being a hairstylist, I was able to be like, oh, everyone it's not just me. Like I began to have compassion and then my defenses even like less and more. And it was kind of this beautiful, um, it's more of like an outward expansion. Like the more I could see, like, wait, like I I could only be present for others in my life as present as I was for myself. I could only be I could only be to that level of awareness with someone else that I was with myself. And so the compassion that came in, the grace that came in, what allowed me to show up in my relationships without being judgmental or pointing fingers or blaming or putting, um, defenses up and blocking people out or shutting down or, arguing or whatever that is, the defense mechanisms that were there blocking intimacy can now be dissolved by understanding like I was operating at this space. Maybe they're operating at this space, and chances are it's typically what that is. And the expansion just continued to bloom into not just my personal and interpersonal relationships, but even like at a collective and global level, like learning compassion for people who we might not agree with what they stand for, but I can respect them and I can also have compassion from the place that they're operating at. So, intimacy to me, like there's so many different layers and me opening up and expanding what that meant to me and how to actually tap into what that authenticity and that vulnerability um, is a pathway through innocence, and just going through that childlike wonder and knowing that if I can trust myself first and foremost, I know I'm safe and I know how to regulate and ground and be centered, that I don't have to project myself outwardly, that I can show up with joy and excitement and without fear of that being taken away or the other shoe falling. And so, it's a different, it might be a different approach, maybe it's not. But this really for me has helped me and other people that I've worked with to be able to not only hone in on, okay, being authentic, shedding the mask, but like tapping into our joy, tapping into what our excitement is, and also expanding that excitement and compassion or outward to allow people into our space and allow other people to actually see like who we are and the experiences that shaped us, because with all of that, like I understood that I was not my experiences. They were merely a pathway to bring me to this evolution of compassion, love, and grace. Uh, and so the intimacy that's found with it, that I feel for me has been it's within everything. Like I really genuinely love the whole spectrum of life because I've been able to find that safety and security that my inner child really wanted as a youngster. And yeah, that's been the core of like my healing. At least tapping into that. And I'm just so grateful to be here, and especially to have had the previous speakers before, because it all ties so well together. And it's such a like I feel so honored and grateful that Jessica came across my met, but all of this, that how this all came together was such a divine intervention and orchestration. So um I yeah, again, thank you so much, and thank you.
Tammy, I'm sure you